director, and within the next year, executive director. And for those of you who don't know, Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, or BDCC as we refer to it, is the regional economic development corporation that covers all of Wyndham County, including Londonderry. And first and foremost, thank you for being here. I don't know, sun's shining, you know, we can't imagine there's anything we'd rather be doing than sitting here, but do appreciate y'all being here tonight to help us with this effort. This is part of a Southeast Vermont Economic Development Strategy, or SeVEDS, as we have affectionately referred to it. And just quickly, how many of you are aware of SeVEDS and what that means? All right, cool, excellent. Well, it is a process that Frank Knott, who I'll introduce in a moment, will get into in a little more detail, but it's a process that's been going on in Wyndham County for a few years to really try to understand what's going on with our regional economy. What's the current state of affairs? What's the data that's telling us in terms of job growth or not, wage growth or not? And in this case, we're learning that no, not a lot of job growth, not a lot of wage growth, population loss, some things that are rather alarming when you look at how we're going to have a viable economy in this region for decades to come, things that kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids can enjoy if they choose to live here. So this strategy is about what are we going to do to turn that around. SeVEDS exists to reverse the economic development decline of this region through a series of strategies to try to help grow jobs, economic vitality, etc. So the process has been underway for a while and has developed this mission statement that you can read here. By the way, this whole PowerPoint presentation is available on the SeVEDS website should you need it, if you'd like to refer to it. So we have our mission statement. We also have part of the process in terms of really getting things moving is to have a shared sense of urgency. That this isn't something we can sit and go, oh gee, that's interesting. We really need to react, we need to respond. And a couple of the factors that happen, low wages, rising cost of living, limited job opportunities, create a disconnect between the skills needed by employers and the skills held by the workforce. We hear that a lot from employers. There is this kind of skill and job availability gap. This also leads to a widely shared sense of economic insecurity, resulting in many Vermonters looking for economic opportunity elsewhere, and few choosing Vermont as a place to live and conduct business, which is another thing. Population decline, we're seeing it happen. We don't want to see it continue. So we've got to turn these trends around, and that's really what SeVEDS is about, and a comprehensive economic development strategy that Frank's going to talk about in a minute. We have also created a vision that southeastern Vermont will have an economy that generates long-term growth and prosperity that improves our quality of life and sustains our quality of place. That's what we're about. How do we turn this around, get to a place where there's steady prosperity and we're all feeling a part of that. And with any good strategy, you have the mission statement, you have a vision statement. We also have a set of goals and objectives for this, which Frank is going to talk about in a little more detail as we go forward here, but goals based on the data, you can see here again, including improving wage parity in the surrounding labor shed, which he'll talk about, increasing the size, quality of the workforce, etc. These are all things that we have to do if we're ultimately going to be successful with this strategy. And as with any good strategy, the goals must be accompanied by a series of measures and outcomes. And these are the outcomes that we're looking for, which again you can take a look at, but trying to increase average wage, increase employment, labor participation, increase the median annual income for associates in some college workforce, etc., which you'll see the data really points to the need to do this. I should point out, by the way, that Jenna Puglisi, who's here, chairs our SeVEDS board. Jenna works at Stratton, so she's interim chair with us now and has been doing fabulous work. Sorry, Jenna, I ignored that. But the other thing I'll do here in a minute is ask y'all to introduce yourself, but just to set this up, this is the progression of vision, mission, goals, objectives, and measures is what SeVEDS is all about and what the comprehensive economic development strategy is all about. I'm kind of racing through this because I want to get to the meat of the matter, but any questions anybody has about what we're trying to do here? Great.
What's the difference between the two?
Frank will get into SeVEDS and CEDS.
SeVEDS and CEDS, or
The base SeVEDS metrics and the regional strategic metrics.
The base.
Well, the
Well,
top,
take-
the top and the bottom.
You're talking about here?
Yep, and there. That we've got a regional strategic, not the first group and the second.
Okay.
Yeah, is there any real difference or?
Yeah, they are different. These up here are what we would call core, or measuring population, labor participation, average wage. Down here are unique metrics to the region.
Okay.
Okay, so and I'll go over what those are.
So standard metrics that you would
Standard
look to in
metrics.
any and versus
And
unique.
then metrics that are specific to the region itself.
Good question, Scott.
I'd say the titles are confusing then.
Yep,
Because
good point.
first one's regional, right?
First one's more broad,
But
and it
it's
still pertains to
SeVEDS
region.
region
Yes.
metrics, and then you got regional metrics.
Right.
So if one's
No.
broad standard,
You are really focused because
That's a good point.
this
I'm easily
titling is used all over the country in our programs, and you're the first person who has ever pointed that out.
But it's a
I'm
good
most
point.
easily confused then.
Quickly before I launch into Frank, why don't we quickly introduce ourselves? We'll start with the Granquist.
Wayne Granquist, live in Weston. Been involved to a certain extent with SeVEDS and BDCC.
Debbie Granquist, Weston, sort of interested community member.
John Lancaster. I'm a property manager at Stratton. I live in Londonderry. I'm on the Development Review Board of Londonderry, and I'm an interested citizen.
I'm Margaret Kading. I'm a resident of Londonderry, just interested. Olga Peters, I write for the Commons.
Scott Folks, resident of Londonderry, also from Stratton, interested citizen and business operator.
Jennifer Glees, I am the interim chair of SeVEDS, as Pat mentioned. I'm also the chair of our Young Professionals Group, and I have a day job at work at Stratton.
I'm Larry Gubb. I'm on the Londonderry Planning Commission, also a resident of Londonderry and interested citizen.
I'm Mark Fontaine. I work for the Pantry right down the street here. Small business, and we're just about 2 years old. We're struggling, and this is of great interest to us there.
Paul Gordon, a Londonderry resident and member of the Londonderry Select Board.
Tim Goodwin, I'm state rep for 5 towns here. I live in Weston, and I'm one of Weston's representatives to Wyndham Regional Commission.
Bob Brandt, also from Weston, member of the Weston Business Council.
Wendy Woods, I am with the BDCC and one of 2 flood recovery officers.
Anthony Summers, I'm the other flood recovery officer with BDCC.
Wyatt Andrews, a videographer with Mondo Media Works.
Great. And I should point out, Wendy and Anthony, they are our flood recovery officers. They're working in Bennington and Wyndham counties as a result of a federal grant we have to work with businesses and communities on long-term economic recovery. So they are beating the streets and running the roads to work with affected businesses and communities to bring resources to those businesses and communities to assure that we have as much stability post-Irene as possible. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Frank Knott. Frank is with Vital Economy. We are just really fortunate to have Frank working on this project because he does this kind of work across the country and internationally. He's been working in communities large and small, brings a lot of knowledge and best practices, and has every time I hear you, Frank, I hear another good story and anecdote, and I'm taking furious notes. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Frank Knott. Thank you.
Just reminds me, now that you have that computer, how are you going to take notes?
I have an iPad.
Are you have an iPad? Okay, good. Well, good evening. We've been at, if I sound a little blurred, we've been at this since 7 o'clock this morning, running all over the region. So this is our like 4th or 5th session today. Yeah. It ends and I drive back to the hotel and start again at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. So we're trying to have fun. That's right. You know how to have fun. I'm going to, the order of the agenda today is to follow, we're going to first of all go over what we call Regional Economics 101. Okay, how you approach the economy in the 21st century. and how economies function, and how we're going to use that approach in the SeVEDS process. Then we're going to go into a regional profile, which will give you a picture of the data that tells you what's been happening for the last 10, 20 years in this region and what it's projecting to happen going forward, if you don't do anything going forward. And you'll see why, when we get through that data, there'll be another slide like this. I'll then point out to you why we have these metrics that are unique to this region as opposed to these metrics that we measure in the region, but we measure in every region. Okay, so these are ones that have been selected for you, by the SeVEDS committee as things that are critically important based on the data. So we'll go over those. At each stage, there's going to be time for you to ask questions, give input. At any time, if you are not hearing this clearly, or you're confused, or I'm using lingo you don't understand, put your hand up and ask a question. This is supposed to be interactive and not just, it is the end of the day. The last thing you need is me standing up here lecturing at you all evening. Okay, so this is scheduled to go. We end at 8:30. We have been pretty precise all yesterday and today and all the meetings. So we'll try to stick to that. And then we'll have a break at around 7:25, and then we'll do issues of challenge and opportunity. Then we'll move to quality of place. We'll have some Q&A related to those two, and then we'll spend about 5 minutes looking at where SeVEDS is going forward. So that's what we're going to do this evening. To help you understand, there's two terms here that sound an awful lot alike, SeVEDS and CEDS. CEDS is a comprehensive economic development strategy. SeVEDS is a southeastern Vermont economic development strategy. Okay? It's always nice to have things really close. CEDS is a term coined by the Economic Development Administration of the U.S. Department of Commerce and is a required strategy for any region that's going to apply to the federal government for infrastructure funds, and is now becoming, and I'll get into this later, a requirement by USDA, HUD, EPA, Department of Transportation, Department of Labor, National Institutes of Science in multiple grant areas. So they're actually using that as a checkoff. So if you don't have a CEDS, you're not going to get a high priority point system. You're going to lose a bunch of points in a competition. So this is one of the reasons. And this particular CEDS is the first one ever done in this region, and is the first one in Vermont and one of the first ones in the country to be done according to best practice performance metrics that have recently been adopted by the EDA. So we'll be, so without any further, oops, I better watch out, I'm on a different computer and the pointer is not in the same place. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about right now is the approaches we're going to use. And by the way, Wyatt, I noticed that because we got a PC link with a projector that works with a PC, the colors are better. Okay. The last meeting, the colors were all blurred for some reason. We use what, come on in. Hi. And have a seat. We've got, just pick a chair in the front, in the middle, whatever. Okay. And just introduce yourself. Everybody else has already done that.
Kevin Bay, Londonderry Town Administrator.
Okay, good to have you here. We use what's called a balanced approach. Most economic development, good evening. Just introduce yourself.
Sharon Crossman, Planning Commission.
Okay, we've got chairs in here. Pick one out. This economic resilience area, which is where most economic development strategies focus, is all about infrastructure, all about building buildings, all about putting roads into those buildings and attracting jobs to those buildings. In the balanced approach, you also focus on human capacity, which is all about workforce. Making sure you've got the great education systems, making sure that you've got good training systems, making sure you've got the kind of workforce you need. Quality of place, which almost no economic development strategies up until recently have focused on, is all about the environment you're living in. the recreational assets you have, the quality of health care, whether you've got a healthy community, whether you've got strong social capital in place for social networks. And all of this is surrounded by a focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. So in order to move forward in this new economy in the 21st century, you need a balanced approach, and you need, throughout that balanced approach, a focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. And that means that innovation and entrepreneurship applies not only to the private sector, but to the nonprofit and public sector. It's comprehensive. So we're using that approach that links back to these industries that are going to use that balanced approach to get to the goals, which we'll talk about in the performance metrics. We'll talk about in a little bit. Okay, first lesson I want to go into Economics 101 is what we call the P2C value chain, or producer to consumer value chain. At this end of the value chain, how many of you know what a value chain is? A few of you, okay. Let's take a simple area like agriculture. You've got forest here, a lot of wood production goes on here. You've got trees that have to be grown, right? That's at the P end, okay, it's where the raw material is. Those trees have to be cut down, they have to be processed, they need to be shaped into something, create a manufactured product that then needs to go through a distributor, to a wholesaler, from a wholesaler to a trucker, to a retail establishment to sell, to the end consumer, whether business or resident or a citizen, okay, or consumer. All those steps have cost in the value chain, okay? So the value chain starts at raw material, ends at consumer. Does that help you understand? Okay. 2/3 of all the profit in that value chain for every industry except the oil industry is in the last 1/3 closest to the consumer. Most rural communities have businesses that are primarily in commodity businesses that are closer to the P end of the value chain. Okay, so the job in vital economy work in SeVEDS is to get communities to begin thinking about how do they get closer to C? How do they get out of the business of producing at the commodity level and start producing goods and services and knowledge at the closer to the consumer? Can anybody imagine why that's important? Why does it make a difference?
Make more money.
You make more money, and that money comes into the region which enables you to pay higher wages. If you're producing higher value-added product, and this is as true in retail as it is in, you can either be a specialty retail store selling unique products and services, or you can be a commodity store. In small towns, you can't compete with Walmart's grocery store, okay? You have to have a niche that you're serving and be a reason why somebody's going to buy something from you that they can't just buy from Walmart that's the exact same product or service. So the idea here is to shrink the distance between P and C, and I'll give some examples later on about that. Okay, the next lesson on here is we describe an economy as a swimming pool. The swimming pool is the size of your economy. Got that? The boundary of it, okay. Let's say that's Wyndham County. The water in the pool is the capital that flows through that economy. All the people in the swimming pool are the ones conducting transactions with each other, okay? And there's only 3 ways that an economy functions. The first is, in the consumer services sector, the residents, the pantry, I assume, sells food. Okay, local people buy that food, primarily. Okay, now unless those local people happen to be visitors who are skiing, if they're local, they're spending all local money. Okay, when you spend local money between each other, it's like being on Labor Day at the swimming pool, and everybody's splashing around, the water's splashing out on the sides of the pool, the sun's beating down, and what's happening to the level of the water? It's evaporating and going down. Okay, so less capital is in the pool. The second way that the economy functions is, in order for me to put gas in my car at the local gas station has to take money out of the local pool and go to some place that has that gasoline that isn't produced here and bring it in. Make sense? So what's happening to the water in the pool? Going down. So between the first two, your economy gets a concussion. There's only one way that an economy grows. There we go. Okay. And that is you make a product or a service that you export and bring capital in. So if you have trees that grow here and you can create beautiful wood products and you can sell them and you can market them to the world, you're bringing capital into the pool. If you are really big in tourism, that is an export economy. That's bringing dollars in that are not produced here. So what happens to the water in the pool? Goes up. So the idea is you want to get so much water in the pool that you got to build a new pool. You got a bigger economy. Make sense? Okay, so in the vital economy approach to comprehensive economic development strategies, every action you take should have two consequences. It gets you either closer to sea or it puts more water in the pool. Does that make sense? Okay, you all now can get a graduate degree in economics because we've just taken years of economic study and put them into two basic slides. Okay, and a lot of our community people that we work with across the country use these slides to communicate to legislators. They use these slides to help people in policy making decisions and help their neighbors understand what a group like SeVEDS is trying to do. Because unfortunately, most programs spend all their time trying to communicate a very complex economic theory about why the economy is slowing or not growing or is growing, and nobody understands what they're talking about. So our view is we got to give you tools to communicate with that the average person can understand. This has a little delay factor on it. Okay. Okay. So, why do you do a SeVEDS? Is there anybody in here that actually runs a business, runs an organization? Okay. Do you have a plan?
Most days.
Most days?
Yes.
Okay. The economies are made up of organizations that have plans, but unfortunately most economies don't have plans. And that's a problem, because when you see the data that we've assembled, the issues that are affecting this region have been going on for a while. The problem is there's been no regional strategy. There hasn't even been a state strategy to deal with the economy of Vermont in terms of what's happening with demographics and what's happening with the growth in the economy. So essentially what we want to make sure of is that you have a clear strategy that everybody understands. Each town understands their role in the strategy so everybody can move forward together. And the purpose of a regional strategy versus a town strategy is we are competing today against country strategies. The next door town is no longer our competition. Now I know that that is news to some people, but in the world of northern New England, you have very limited county governments, so the concepts of all the power and all the strength has been built up in towns. But the simple fact of the matter is, how many of you believe that your town has enough resources to compete against a country strategy? How many even believe that Windham County would have enough resources to do that without partnering with other people? Okay, you need to have critical mass of resources to compete effectively. And that's what we're trying to do with a comprehensive strategy. And to do that, we're going to use a little tool called SMART goals. How many of you heard of the term SMART goals? A few of you. Okay, this is about 7 years old, this whole approach. It says that any goal must be specific, it must be measurable, it must be achievable, it must be relevant, and it must be time-based. So whenever Unfortunately, in many cases, I've probably read over 1,000 economic strategies in this country over the last 20 years. Most of them have goals like, we want more jobs. We want to reduce poverty. Is that specific? Is it measurable? When are you going to do it? Okay, all of those things, okay, and so most economic strategies do not have SMART goals, because guess what happens with a SMART goal? There's accountability. And boy, let me tell you something, people do not like that term, because they feel like they're going to get blamed, whereas I believe very strongly in accountability, because if I don't know where I'm going, and things aren't working, I have no idea what I was intending to do, without having some plan to work against. So, the other thing we just want to focus on is the process that's going to be used is based on best practices, using performance metrics. It is asset-based, and what we mean by asset-based, it means we're going to ask you as a region to identify what makes your region unique. What are the unique assets in the region? And through each of these sessions we've been having, people have identified different ideas about what's going to work. We also want to make sure that the strategy is diversifying your economy and not leaving the region dependent on one horse to ride. That it can, it has some diversity to it, and that the strategy is measurable. Okay. Finally, what we want to do is focus the community on understanding that at the regional level, in order to have prosperity, increased prosperity, which I think should be a basic goal of an economic strategy. You only get increased prosperity through increased productivity. And there's only 3 ways you increase productivity. One is you either have an innovation in education, a technology innovation, or an innovation in organizational structure. An example of a technology innovation, this state had a lot of textile mills years ago where you had using the water systems, and you had these big mills with these big looms connected to a drive shaft, and with a belt that was connected each loom to that drive shaft. When one loom went down, what happened to the plant? Everything shut down until the invention of the electric motor, which was put onto each and it created a situation where each person at that loom could be measured in terms of individual productivity, which also changed the method of compensation in piecework. So you had this innovation in technology actually and it changed also the way the organization was managed, how compensation was done. And in order for that new system, the industrial system to work, we also had to have a new innovation in education. It was called public high school. Up until the early 1900s, high schools were actually, remember the Latin school? They were basically private schools when they first started. Only in about 1910 did we start to use tax dollars to pay for high schools. And then in the 40s and 50s, it was community college was the new innovation. And the new innovation in organizational structure that was done around the Industrial Revolution was a wonderful word that is now a very pejorative word called bureaucracy. It was a new invention in organizational structure to manage the Industrial Revolution. And our problem today is most government, would you agree that most governments in this country and in this state are organized in a hierarchical model?
Yes.
Okay? That is what bureaucracy invented. Except it was in like the 1890s, 1900s. Okay, we are now in a flat world economy where you have to have much flatter organizations going, and boundaries don't make any difference. Yet our organizational structures, our taxing structures are set up as if boundaries make a difference. And so we actually have to change the way we think about how we're organized in order for our economy to work more effectively. Does that make sense? Based on the way and the internet has a lot to do with that. Okay, so the idea here is that with the SMART SeVEDS, we're going to take all these separate pieces of the pie that aren't connected to one another, aren't collaborating with one another. We're going to put them together to work as one unit so the pie gets bigger. So the idea is that we want to help people understand that by collaborating across the region, town by town with each other, even though you might hate each other when you play Friday night football, that your economy can actually get bigger if you collaborate. Most regions that have economic trouble today have been in trouble for a while. And those regions believe, and their leaders believe, that their economy is a zero-sum game. It can't get any bigger, therefore if I share with somebody, I lose. I have to give up something. What we need to do is help people understand that by collaboration, the economy actually the swimming pool gets much bigger. And so even though we're collaborating and sharing, we're actually increasing the amount of capital coming into that pool, and everybody's getting a little bit more, and everybody's got increased prosperity. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's a quick overview of the basics that we're gonna work on.